What are you 100 sure is true even though you can prove it? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. My own conspiracy theory. In the UK, we have a vast overpopulation of traffic cones. They don't know where to store them all, so they just randomly put them on a road for a couple weeks, then move them to a different road with no works actually being done. Answer. I often think about the logistics behind large-scale projects, not so much the massive amount of energy needed to, say, rebuild a bridge or add a new lane to 30 miles of highway. I think about how there are people whose entire job is managing a warehouse of road cones for a large enough entity. Like a couple dozen road cones for a smaller utility or construction company isn't that big of a deal. But a state road department or a company that works in multiple states with multiple crews, surely they have somebody keeping track of a massive amount of cones. We had construction on the interstate recently, and there were cones out, maybe 15 feet apart, for maybe 30 miles. That's north of 10K cones. Somebody has to be nearly paid full-time to ensure they get out, stored, inventoried, and replaced when necessary. It's a spreadsheet I'd love to get a look at someday. Story 2. Netflix included a lot of smoking for their characters as advertisement for the tobacco industry, since there was even a British show restricted on how they can advertise. Answer. In some countries, the media can't even portray tobacco use. Smoking scenes edited out. There was even a British show I saw where in the original, the camera faded up from black, and we see a few seconds of two characters smoking before the third guy walks in. The same show on Netflix cuts the smoking, instead fading up the moment the third character walks in. Story 3. Pretty sure my granddad was involved with smuggling, the mob, something. Dock worker in the 50s, 60s, didn't let his wife visit him at work. Gave her some really nice ivory earrings and other less than legal items. Can't prove it. He died before I was born, edit. Also wore a suit every day. As a dock worker, my mom also told me that he would always walk so that the wind wouldn't mess up his hair. So seems pretty on brand for mobster of some kind. Answer. I had a neighbor when I was 10, late 80s, that worked at the Long Beach shipyard, supposedly as a crane operator. He and his wife, a model half his age, would go to Vegas every 5 to 6 weeks and always came back with big jackpot wins. I would take care of their 2 huge Rottweilers when they were gone. A few times when they'd return, he'd flash me a briefcase full of banded stacks of $100s and tell me it was a 20 or 30 grand jackpot win on slots. As an adult, I've been to Vegas. Nobody wins like that, ever. Nor do any dock workers get weeks of time off every month. They would take me out to dinners at restaurants filled with cigar smoke and old men in suits with young women by their side, or whale watching on his big jerk speedboat, the Razzmatazz around Catalina. VIP booths at the racetrack and a few major league games. It was an experience, for better or worse, that I still appreciate having. It was a stark contrast from the life I lived at home. Story 4. I'm convinced my papa smoked a pipe. I can picture it vividly in my mind. My mom, Papa's daughter, aunts and uncles and cousins say he didn't. I am the only one that remembers this. It's like he only smoked his pipe around me, and the rest of the time he smoked cigarettes. This is a hill I will die on. Story 5. There's no unified cabal. We are ruled by incompetent, inbred, perverted buffoons, propped by the inertia of the system that is maintained by opportunistic barnacles. These people are too egotistical to maintain an Illuminati-like unity. Answer. I have seen good, intelligent, well-organized people attempt to run a committee of just a few people and be unable to get things done effectively. The chances of doing this decrease almost exponentially the more people there are, and double losses if a lot of money is involved. This is why I don't believe in things like the Illuminati, alien contact, or faking the moon landings. Humans aren't that good keeping secrets. Story 6. I have no children. I have my mic turned off on my phone. I had my phone that had a dead battery in my back pocket. I'm at a party and a friend shared a story quietly, just to me, about a bedwetting issue she was navigating with her oldest in pee pads. The next day I charge my phone and I see adolescent bedwetting products on every webpage. Answer. There's so much data harvesting going on that companies like Facebook literally generate profiles on you even if you've never signed up for it, and it's all based on what your friends do. Basically, a very simple version of this could have been something like this. Your friend Googled pee pads on their computer. Your friend has his or contacts shared with some app, so that app knows you exist. It doesn't know you exactly, but it knows your name, number, and possibly screen names for different services. Your friend connects to Wi-Fi. Your friend posts a picture to social media, and you're in while connected to Wi-Fi and tags you. Now the data collected links you to a location with that friend and the EXIF data on the photo, if it's not stripped, lets whatever is gathering data know you're together at the same time. That's a contrived example. Reality is much worse. Facebook, for example, collects around 530 data points on each user, probably more by now. All of that is harvested and cross-referenced and sold to data brokers and used to target ads in real time. Story 7. Aliens exist somewhere out there in our vast universe. There are likely some in our galaxy. Life can't have happened only once in such a mind-bogglingly vast space. Answer. Due to the sheer size and scale of the universe, probability almost guarantees there is abundant alien life in the cosmos, but also due to the sheer and scale of the universe, it's likely that we will never encounter or even become aware of it. There could be billions of planets out there with alien life, and it's possible that none of them will ever discover one another. Story 8. Psych operations on social media from foreign countries using social media to attempt to destroy the U.S. from within. I know I sound like a radical conservative, but trust me, I'm not LOL. Answer. Dude, there's literally proof of this. It's not right-wing at all. In the U.S. and all across the world, people on the right are starting to shift their opinion towards Russia's nice. In Canada, it basically shown that all parties had candidates who were compromised, and the pro-Trump right-wing party's leader, Pierre Poilievre, refused to pass a security background check, which prompted the whole country to freak out. He was projected to win by a landslide. He lost. Canada's Foreign Interference Commission. And you want to know one of the reasons why? This is even more fudge up than you can imagine. As the Arctic is melting, a new trade route is opening up. Russia has territory on half of its shores. China has claimed itself half Arctic nation. There used to be an Arctic Council of all countries who are bordering the Arctic, but no more. It was disbanded when Russia declared war with Ukraine. Trump's weird obsession with Canada? Yes. From CBC, Canada's public broadcasting, as beige and informational as you can get. Not some obscure woo-woo thing. Canada's former Minister of Foreign Affairs and representative for Canada in the Arctic Council. It's not a conspiracy, it's the truth. Story 9. The RTO, return to office push, is because shareholders are losing money on the stock market, not from the company they own shares in, but in investments in real estate, with most employees being remote office retail space value plummeted. So instead of doing the right thing, these rich bastards pressure companies they partially controlled to have workers to return to the office to boost their earnings. Let me work remote, damn it. Answer. I've been told in some cases it's used as a shareholder-friendly way to cull their workforce. A company may want to lay off a bunch of people to make profit number go up. However, mass layoffs are often a public affair and a sign a company is performing poorly and thus bad for the stock price. So instead, a RTO push will inevitably result in a bunch of people quitting, which is much quieter and less likely to impact the stock price, thus achieving the same goal as a mass layoff. Story 10. The moon landing was 100 real, and the footage we see is real and of that moon landing. Not taking away anything from the heroes on the mission and in the control room or anything like that, but I am 100 convinced that the live transmissions and newscasts were delayed to make sure that there was no screw-ups. Answer. The conspiracy theory I heard was that they filmed a fake landing to save face in the event of the real mission going wrong, which is utter nonsense. The White House even declassified papers which showed how Nixon would have responded to a failure or disaster, including an address to the nation. And if there was any hint whatsoever of fakery, then the USSR would have been on it like a measles rash. Guess what? They weren't. It happened. It was real. I am somewhat surprised that we haven't really been back since, given technology is a lot better and there's more to discover. Although, I guess we don't really need to send humans precisely because the tech is better. Story 11. This is recent, but I'm 100 sure. My brother, who was unresponsive and in a coma on life support, recognized my voice when I spoke to him. My brother passed away 2 weeks ago from a brain aneurysm. He was in the hospital for a month prior with a blood infection, but was doing better and was sent home. The first night back, he woke in the middle of the night with a horrible headache. His longtime girlfriend called the ambulance, and he was unresponsive by the time he got to the hospital. They put him on life support pretty soon thereafter. My parents called to let me know around 10 a.m. that morning, and due to distance travel, I didn't get to the hospital until the following morning around 10 a.m. I went back to see him in the ICU where he was completely still and looked asleep. The first words I said in a soft tone were, "Hey man, it's your brother." Immediately he reacted to my voice by what appeared to me to be gasping for air and lifting his chin up very noticeably. So much so that I said to him, "Calm down, brother. You're okay. You're okay." It only lasted about 5 seconds, which felt like a minute, and the rest of the day at his bedside there were not any reactions to that degree, besides some involuntary small movements that are more typical when people are on life support. My sister was not able to be there, but I put her on speakerphone so she could say goodbye. My mom and dad came in and talked to him, his girlfriend, nurses, but no reactions. Over the past couple of weeks since his passing, I've read medical papers about sound being the last sense to leave you prior to dying. I've also read about theories on consciousness near passing and other people's experiences similar to mine. I know for a fact he recognized my voice and knew I was there with him, regardless of any contrary explanations I read or am told. My brother and I, regrettably, had a falling out about 10 years ago, and despite a few texts between us, only spoke once during that period. A regret I will always carry with me. He was a good brother and I love him very much. Story 12. If God exists, the first people God will punish are the leaders of every organized religion for falsely claiming a special connection with God solely for the purpose of gaining power and money because no such connection ever existed. Answer: 100. I have seen some things I was horrified by while others seemed to think it was okay. Dated a kid whose father was a bishop in a Church of God in college, and he always bought stuff on the company. Trips to Hawaii, Dallas Cowboy tickets, trips to Disney World, talking for his entire extended family. Also watched a homeless man give all the money to an offering plate, and everyone praised how great he was. I was sick knowing where it was going to go. I flat out refused to go back. It broke me, and I refused any travel with the family. Not surprisingly, we broke up. Taking from those who need the money when you don't have a need is just gross. Story 13. In grade 6, Kevin stole 10 out of my locker. No one was ever brought to justice for this heinous crime, but I know it was that little prick Kevin. Story 14. Tom Cruise wants to leave the church, but is so far into Scientology, he knows there is no way out. And his finances are tied to the church, and he can't leave anything to his kids. So he is trying to eliminate himself via movie stunt. So a life insurance payout goes to his family. Story 15. I believe 70 of violent crimes would end if we had robust mental health services that took cases seriously and handled the individuals with care, getting them on medication and preparing them for an independent and normal life, if at all possible. Look at practically every serial killer or mass murderer. They were crazy and did not get the help they desperately needed. If they had gotten help, perhaps what they did could have been avoided. Better to be proactive and help people struggling rather than to wait for them to snap and punish them for things that could have been avoided. Story 16. That there's people that just dislike on you for no good reason. They will outwardly be okay with you, pleasant, but there's something just not right. They may not say anything bad, but they'll never hold you in any esteem either. Backhanded compliments, subtle lapses on social conduct, lean pretending not to hear you when you're speaking. You can't prove any of it, but you can feel it deep down. Answer: this isn't unproven, and we're all the hater at least once in our lives. I'm not proud of it, and I'm not saying this is how we should be, but you cannot tell me you've never looked at some rando and just disliked their stupid face. It's right there, right on the front of their stupid heads. It's a horrible instinct. I do my very best to talk myself down from that, but it's happened in life a few times for no good reason whatsoever. Story 17. Purse companies pay women's jeans companies to put tiny pockets, or none at all, to sell more purses. Story 18. One time I went to a river beach with my family. I was 10 years old, and I remember an Egyptian-like canoe with a dude dressed as a pharaoh and 2 other dudes as servants. I saw them. The pharaoh dude looked at me and waved, and for some weird reason, no one on my family remembers it. On the same day, my dad told me I saw things and that didn't happen. I'm not Egyptian, and this happened in Portugal. Story 19. The human race will never physically meet an intelligent alien race. I'm not happy about it. It's just physics. Without wormhole warp, teleportation, or cryo travel, it's not happening. Story 20. Early 80s, a female acquaintance was taken down by her wealthy Manhattan-raised frat boyfriend. He committed tragic end before going to trial. Months later, I saw him in Grand Central Terminal. I yelled his nickname. He turned, saw me, and ran. I chased him for blocks, but he got away. 100 sure the wealthy faked their deaths. Story 21. That our universe is not all that exists. It emerged from some kind of chaotic quantum field that probably contains many other universes. That would resolve some of the problems with understanding our own universe. But maybe I've been reading too much science fiction. Actually, I wouldn't put it at 100, but I think it's reasonably likely. Answer: the is recent news about James Webb. The idea that our universe exists within a black hole is supported by recent research, particularly from the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST. Observations suggest that the vast majority of galaxies rotate in the same direction, indicating a preferred axis that aligns with black hole cosmology which posits that the entire universe could be the interior of a black hole. This suggests that our universe might be a bubble within a larger multiverse, challenging existing theories about cosmic origins. However, some researchers caution that these findings are still preliminary and require further investigation to confirm the implications of this theory. Story 22. I think most flat earthers are really just trolls who like pushing buttons. I remember visiting the original Flat Earth Society website way back when not everybody was even online, and you could kind of tell it was set up by scientists simply as an exercise meant to challenge their peers to do better at making arguments and explaining scientific concept better to the public. I believe what happened was a few gullible people thought it was real, and this did appeal to a number of people who believed in flat Earth. But I think most people who claim they believe in a flat Earth are, at this point, just trolling everybody, pushing everyone's buttons. I'm almost positive most of the flat Earth groups on Facebook are just bait for engagement, and contributors who post content in support of flat Earth are mostly part of the bait. Answer: I want to believe that, but anti-vaxxers are just as nuts as we know those are real. One of the fuckers runs Health and Human Services now. If that level of anti-intellectual, blatant, obvious stupidity and hatred can be real once, it can be real twice. I suspect it started that way. Some trolls trolling, but then people bought into it and it snowballed. Story 23. That my dead fiancé sends me signs of love from the other side. People say it's just my brain's way of coping, but some of the shoot is just way too wild for coincidence. Call me crazy, but I truly believe he's still with me. Answer: my grandpa lived 5 hours away from me. My mom told me that he was on the verge of passing way too late, and I planned on driving out there first thing in the morning to say my goodbyes. I woke up around 4 a.m. after having the most vivid dream of my life, where I sat down and he held my hands and said goodbye, and we talked. When I woke up, I could still feel the way his hands had felt in mine. A few hours later, I found out that he had passed around the time I woke up. I'm really convinced that he came and said goodbye to me. Story 24. I have this strong belief that small acts of generosity can create ripples of positivity in ways we might never see. Story 25. Lee Greenwood didn't write "God bless the USA," aka proud to be an American. It was written by Steve Hallmark, who spent most of his life as a bookie in Oklahoma. I 100% know this is true because I've heard the original recording that was made in the late 1960s, and Steve told me how he sold the rights to the song when he was an aspiring singer. Here's the quick story. My sister briefly worked for him when she was in high school as his assistant, essentially a go-for decent pay as far as high school jobs go. She stayed in touch with him for a few years, and I would occasionally go over to his house when she would come back from college. One night we were over there hanging out before I headed off to college, where I thought I was going to study music and become a famous, or at least working, jazz musician. When I told Steve, he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a musician," and proceeded to pull out a few records of his, primarily a cappella four-man group. The name was something like The Four Freshmen, but of course he was not in The Four Freshmen. Anyway, it was The Four Something. One of the songs was "God Bless the USA," and I held the album cover in my hand and read the publishing date, which was sometime in the late 60s. He told me that he sold the song rights to Greenwood for something like $1,000. Unfortunately, Steve passed away in 2009 and may have been estranged from his family. I've looked and can't find any mention of him as a singer-songwriter and have come up empty, and am certain there are no more copies of that record to be found. I probably would have forgotten it if Lee Greenwood wouldn't continue to ride those coattails of a song he never wrote and peddle his fake patriotism to crowds at Mar-a-Lago. Story 26. That some of our dreams are just little brief memories we still somehow have from a past life we experienced. Down and he held my hand. There's more to the Las Vegas shooting than what was let on. One guy shooting 8 different guns with video that makes it sounds like talking guns. No one saw him bringing or was suspicious of all the guns and ammo he toted in the hotel. He got through the hurricane glass. His house inexplicably burns down basically the next day. No reason or rhyme for the crime. His brother says he would never do this, and all of a sudden there's child adult content found on a computer that runs Windows 98, I think it is. The brother is shut up and the investigation into him goes nowhere. Something doesn't add up. Answer: I agree in full. Now, it's always important to remember that sometimes things look way more suspicious than they actually are when information is missing. A great example of this is the narrative that was taking shape over Gene Hackman's passing. Before we had all the info, there was speculations about homicide, double suicides, and the like, and with the holes in the story, those ideas did seem plausible. It for sure was a weird circumstance. In the end, Hackman's wife just had a medical episode linked to her hantavirus, and Hackman himself was too far lost to dementia to do anything to help her or himself and died of exposure, dehydration. So, while I agree there's more to the Vegas shooter story, we also have to be careful about jumping to conclusions that are too Hollywood. Sometimes things are just bonkers. Maybe this is one of those times. Or maybe there's info that would show he was just simply a deranged dude who did a heinous thing for no real discernible reason. Story 28. 90 of the people in my neighborhood can't parallel park for shoot. I'd be able to prove it with pictures, but it'd be a waste of time. Nothing will really make the situation better. Story 29. I believe that kindness you give out eventually comes back to you in some way, even if it takes years. Story 30. Fantasy sports was an intentional test preamble to online sports betting to get people hooked on caring about prop bets and having a stake in every single game. Story 31. That we are all components that make up a big being, and that being is the closest thing we have to a God. It only cares about us in terms of its own well-being and survival, is not tuned into the everyday moment struggles of our lives, and may not even be aware that we exist, just as we used to be ignorant about our own anatomy and physiology. In turn, some parts that make us up are sentient in ways we can't understand, and each of our bodies are a whole universe that they inhabit. It's turtles all the way up and all the way down. Answer. I believe the God being is more like a parent of adult children. It's not that it doesn't care, but it knows it doesn't have the right to interject into our affairs. I don't think this is God's realm. I think it's ours, our private bedrooms, essentially. And I don't strictly mean human when I say ours. I also believe when all is said and done, most of what happens in this life will prove irrelevant. It feels long and important now, the same way the monster chasing you in a nightmare feels important and the dream feels long. But dreams last for mere minutes, sometimes seconds only, and the monster was only real in a very particular sense. When we wake up from this life, I think all of its struggle and pain essentially fades away with the morning routine. I also think we've all been here before. I think once we see the reality of this time and space, we're far less moved by it than we currently feel, and have all chosen to return here time and time again. I think we're actually trying to accomplish something here, across numerous incarnations. Story 32. There are men that piss in the strangest fudge ways. Ever go to the men's urinals and see piss on the floor, exactly underneath the urinal? Are they pissing straight downwards? Answer, are you female? Because every male on the planet can explain this to you. Sometimes piss just doesn't go where you point it. I shoot you not. I've had the stream do a darn and near 90-degree angle on exit. Aimed at the pot, pissed on the wall. Sometimes it does this thing where it splits into two streams, and the streams kind of cross in the center and splay out at the end. So not matter what you do, only one of the streams ends up in the toilet. And remember, we have zero muscular control past the external urethral sphincter. Once the piss has passed that boundary, whatever ended up in the tubing, is coming out of the tubing. And it's hard to close the sphincter back off once it's open too. Doesn't stop on a dime. We don't piss on the floor because we're assholes or fudge around. It's just not always as cut and dry a process as you might think it would be. What does make us assholes is when we don't clean it up. That's entirely on us. Story 33. Cats know if you are sick with cancer. If it wasn't for my cat's strange behavior, I wouldn't have gotten checked. Story 34. Aliens are in our same space-time, but don't interact with us BC. We're the trailer park trash of the universe. Story 35. The entire world is conspiring in an elaborate and pointless gaslighting of me that cantaloupe tastes good. Story 36. PETA is at least in part funded by the meat and dairy industry to perpetrate the crazy vegan stereotype. I've known a lot of vegans and not a single one had been preachy or pushy about it. Plus, PETA has eliminated tons of animals, which doesn't seem like something a real vegan would do. Story 37. That most people who went to Epstein's Island did it not for the intimacy, but because he was laundering their money, including Mr. T. Consider this. No one really knows where Epstein got his money. Story 38. That there is some sort of supreme being, aka God. Not religious, but spiritual. An old roommate called me a non-practicing Unitarian. Story 39. That my pets understand English, they just choose not to listen, especially the cat. She's fluent and rude. Story 40. The fentanyl crisis in America is just deliberate but manufactured by the Chinese government. The largest demographics to suffer from fentanyl addiction are also the largest ones to enlist in the military. If everyone is too addicted to fentanyl to join the military, there will be no one to help defend Taiwan. I thought this before 45 was elected though, so now I'm not entirely sure. Story 41. That orangutans can really speak, but choose not to out of fear of being forced to work for humans. I've always enjoyed this little legend. Story 42. The Rand Corporation, in conjunction with the Saucer People, under the supervision of the reverse vampires, are forcing our parents to go to bed early in a fiendish plot to eliminate the meal of dinner. Story 43. That the NHL is rigged against Canadian teams in favor of trying to grow the game in the much larger U.S. market. Story 44. That almost all animals communicate with each other, even between species. They may not understand, like humans that speak different languages, but they get the gist of things through sound and body language. It kind of blows my mind that people think they aren't as smart or have rich internal lives. Story 45. People say that pet reptiles can't feel love connection like dogs, and cats can, but how do they know? I feel like it's possible. Story 46. Trump's incompetence caused the pandemic. There was a CDC team in China whose job was to monitor for emerging viruses and train their Chinese counterparts how to do this job on their own. That team office was closed in 2017. Too many experts try to be fair. Appearances of CoV-2 probably would have spread out of control even if that team was in place. I'm not willing to be as charitable. Those teams around the globe have done darn good work containing outbreaks. The China office never got their chance. Story 47. I am 100% sure that people are capable of changing, but only when they truly want to. You can offer support and encouragement, but no one changes unless the drive comes from within. I cannot prove it with data, but I have seen it in real life many times. The shift often happens quietly, then suddenly becomes clear to everyone else. It is one of those truths that feels certain without needing hard evidence. Story 48. There is way more work done by governments, police keeping the rich alive and free than there is supporting any of us. I have had 3 break-ins to my apartment over my lifetime, and each time the police have done diddly shoot. Yet when someone shoplifts a 5-item in the dollar store in the mall calls, it's all hands on deck. It's stupid. Story 49. Simulation theory and the religious God are the same theory in different time periods. We just explain them the best we can with what we know or believe at the time. Story 50. That my father-in-law is a PDF. No way to prove it, and I dislike jumping to conclusions like that. Will I let him alone with my children? Absolutely the fudge not. Story 51. The levee in the lower 9th Ward didn't fail during Katrina. I was told by multiple residents 1 year later when I was there that they witnessed the military place bags on the structure in the middle of the night, then left quickly. Not long later, booms were heard and the water came flooding in. These were different people at different times, so not like they could hear one story and build on it. Our government never could admit this BC. They would be liable for all the loss of life and property. Their theory was the military thought sacrificing the poor ghetto would ultimately save the city as a whole. These are stories that people told me. I was not there, so who's to say? Story 52. There's no such thing as an infinity that is bigger than another. There are only infinities that are countable and uncountable. Cantor's diagonal argument can be applied to integers as well, and any infinite set that includes numbers in between integers, 1, 1.5, 2, only approaches an infinite number of terms faster. It doesn't reach a larger number of infinite terms. Story 53. Science has been gamified and falls prey to modern capitalist problems. If your lab spends 2 years studying a thing and gets a bad result, you probably won't get funded again. Professors love their researchers and believe in the work. They're likely to manipulate things to look more promising and meaningful to keep the lab funded, employees paid, research continuing. It's happening everywhere, and explain history that is claimed a crisis. P-rigging is a huge problem. Story 54. We are all connected in some way. When I help someone, I feel good. When I hurt someone, I feel bad. This was the start of my faith in something bigger than me, a higher power. I'll never fully understand it, but I try to a little more every day. I can choose to believe I'm a bunch of meat on a ball spinning around a star, or I can believe a little more is going on. My life has been a lot better since I switched to the second. Story 55. He's on that goddamn list, I know it in my bones. And in all of the accusations of the victims too, but also my bones. Story 56. Branson. MO is the gate to hell. Everything I hear about that place irks me. They even let Jim Bakker set up a new ministry there, and people attend it. Story 57. There is something that is me that exists beyond the confines of my brain. Soul, spirit, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. I am me, and that is a thing separate from my brain and body. It is ruled, controlled by my brain and body, of course, but there is still an undefined thing that is me. Story 58. There is one road a block from my house that Google Maps has never ever recognized as a viable way to travel, despite it being the obvious solution to anyone in our neighborhood who needs to move out in that direction. I suspect a Google sub-founder lives in the area and pulled some strings to reduce traffic on the street. Story 59. In 2019, my town was experimented on by the government with some kind of weaponized pheromones. I lived near a military base at the time. One night, my wife and I both woke up at about 2 a.m., insane with desire, and go out at each other in bed with an intensity we hadn't had in a decade. The next day, I mention I'm worn out to a coworker, and he says him too. He and his wife went at it pretty good last night. Weird because we're not a do-it-in-the-middle-of-the-night couple, but they lived about a quarter mile from us. My wife was on a walk the next afternoon with a neighbor who alluded to the same thing. Spontaneous, intense, middle-of-the-night intimacy. I think the military, or one of its contractors, tested something on our neighborhood or city that night. Story 60. That we only know a microscopic amount of what there is to know about the physics that govern the universe, and that what we currently know as law may turn out to be false under certain circumstances that we may eventually be able to exploit. Story 61. The alpha male content in the new feminist movement and alt-right content are propaganda sourced from outside the U.S. to cause divide in the U.S., and that many of the current online trends we see are also from the same source. I've seen way too many right-winged American talking points pop up exactly the same way, but in Turkish in Turkey. I'm positive that there is a huge campaign to cause division in countries with these topics, but I just can't prove it, and I'm almost positive it is Russia and not China. Story 62. That menstrual cycles actually do sync, and specifically that alpha wombs exert a hormonal pull that affects other uteruses around them. Mine has pulled many into its orbit over the years, close friends, obviously, but also a roommate whose cycle became regular and eventually synced to mine for the first time in her life while living with me. And even a coworker who hadn't had a period in years got one after a few months of working together. Anyway, there's no scientific evidence to support this, but I think that's probably because no one funds gynecological research. Answer. I think that there's a lot about the female body that we don't understand, care to research, but there is plenty of woo that has no scientific basis, especially with pregnancy, yet seems to work or be relevant anyways. There are a lot of old wives' tales and superstitions that are more valid than we give them credit for, and I have a hard time dismissing collective and generational knowledge completely when it comes to that stuff. Story 63. I'm 100% sure that between the hiring and firing of countless people, departments, and projects, that Trump will be leaving office with kabillions more than we'll ever know about. Story 64. I saw the future once, decades ago, but I've never been able to do it since. It was just like deja vu, but I saw what was going to happen a few seconds in the future, like I was fast forwarding. Story 65. Phones are reading our thoughts more than the computer technology that could envision objects that we thought of. It must be by far more advanced. It's not just algorithms and data collection. Again, can't prove it though. Story 66. 911 happened on 911 because they were trying to send a message of nothing is safe, and 911 is the emergency number in the U.S. Everyone laughs at me for this theory, but I can't understand what's so stupid about it. If there is a reason why it's stupid LMK because nobody has provided me with one that made sense. Story 67. People's energy can continue to linger in their long-term possessions homes. I don't necessarily think this is supernatural. I believe there's a scientific explanation for this, and we just haven't discovered it yet. But when you walk into an antique shop, you can feel the intense energy of all the things that have been living in people's houses for decades and decades and decades. It always gives me vertigo a little bit. I can feel it in really old places as well. Answer. Not exactly the same thing, but the underlying idea is similar to any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic by Arthur C. Clarke. The idea of ghosts or energy from things like you mentioned, it's just something we don't understand yet, so it's written off as supernatural and fake, etc. Maybe on a quantum level, those energies are there and reverberate through time, and as such reverberate longer and more intensely the longer the person was in or around the thing. Story 68. These will sound like jokes, but I swear. The bug revolution. A theory I came up with as a 6-year-old that one day all of the bugs, insects, arachnids, etc. around the world will realize they outnumber us and will take over and eliminate us. All ventriloquist dummies know that I know they're all alive, but know that I won't tell a soul because I'm a baby punk and I'm hella scared of them. Story 69. I'm 100 sure my cat pays rent in another dimension because there's no other reason she disappears for 6 hours a day and comes back like nothing happened. Story 70. Did he eliminate Notorious B.I.G.? He had everything to gain from Biggie's passing. He was basically Biggie's little meanie, and he disliked it. Biggie was assassinated in March of '97, and Diddy released his Shoot tribute song, "I'll Be Missing You," 2 months later, and his career took off from there. Story 71. We are living in a simulation. $100. Believe we may have lived more than once, but we just have our memories wiped and simulation reset. 20. Believe. Deja vu? Ever just know something? Story 72. That actual wealthy people don't give a fudge about poor people as a human being. They see us as a nuisance or a way to use us to make money by paying as little as possible. I also believe this has always been the case and will never change. Human beings are the worst species to ever inhabit the earth. Story 73. Musician Elliott Smith was taken down by his girlfriend. You're telling me that they were in the middle of a fight, she went to go shower, and then he stabbed himself multiple times in the chest? Nope. Story 74. Trump didn't get shot in the ear. He got a splinter. And the way the Secret Service allowed him to be visible to the crowds and photographers is super suspect. Story 75. The government is behind. Story 77. Pandemic. China has little to nothing to do with it. They're putting it in substances to create hysteria and sway public opinion to allow them to continue funneling money toward the war on substances. Story 76. Men are the weaker intimacy from gestation to passing. I could look up all the studies. Story 76, but I'm too tired. Story 77. After we die, we go on. This is not the end. In fact, we go on and on and on and on. We have lots of clues about this, including kids who have told tremendous tales about their former lives, and some have been verified, proven. So, enjoy your ride through this time and do your best while you're here, but no worries, we go on. Story 78. Paul Wellstone was assassinated by Republican operatives. The timing was just too suspicious, and there were too many irregularities in the investigation. Story 79. There is an annoyance team who assemble every time I walk into a Walmart. They do things like stand in the middle of aisles and push their carts so you can't get around them, have conversations with people and block entranceways, breathe on your neck when you're standing in line, scream at their crying child louder than the child is screaming. I don't know why they do it, but based on my experience in Walmart, they are doing it. Story 80. The facts and horrors of pregnancy and birth aren't widely discussed or taught because if they were, people wouldn't want to have kids as easily. Story 81. Google Maps will take you past businesses that pay Google, not the fastest route to your destination. Story 82. The moon is bigger when it's on the horizon versus when it's high in the sky due to something related to the curvature of the atmosphere. Story 83. God, if there is a God, doesn't give a shoot about humans. God wants the whales to come back to dry land and conquer. Story 84. The technology exists these days for airport security to screen larger volumes of liquid, but airport vendors lobby the TSA to keep the rule in place so they can keep selling beverages post-security and extremely marked up prices. Story 85. Everyone's walking around pretending they know what they're doing, but we're all just winging it and hoping nobody notices. Story 86. Jeopardy was rigged with inferior competition, no cheating, to produce winners after the Mike Richards firing as a distraction of the top 10 all-time winners came within a year of the incident. Story 87. The fact that we're not the only living, intelligent beings in the universe, it's infinitely large. Chances of us being the only planet with life out there is not zero. It's decently high, actually. We haven't even fully explored all the planets in our own solar system, let alone other ones. No way in hell we're the only ones. Story 88. There's more than enough money, food, clothing, and brain resources to comfortably provide for the whole human race, save the planet, and make everyone immortal. What is holding everything back is the ruling caste of immoral, imbecile billionaires that need to feel superior and powerful. Story 89. The handbag industry is working with the pants industry. There's no other reason why women have such small pockets on pants compared to men. It's all a scam to make us buy bags. Story 90. Casinos are playing the long game by hosting family-friendly events like concerts and fireworks, having arcades and movie theaters, etc., in hopes that children will grow up and think, you know what used to be a lot of fun when I was a kid? Going to the casino. We should check it out, maybe play a few slots. Story 91. My small steak conspiracy here in Scotland is that the bakers have colluded to make sure there is no steak pies left in the ovens at lunchtime, as they make more money off the lesser pies, minced chicken, macaroni, etc., and they won't restock the steak pies as they want to sell the lesser pies, so they can justify having all the other ones they have on display because it looks better. Story 92. Ghosts and spirits. I was standing in the palace of Uday Saddam Hussein, and I felt this unnerving energy of 100 evil. But everywhere I went, I felt this aura of what I can only describe as people, their experiences, and passing. To this day, it's almost impossible to describe to people who weren't there. Story 93. The lost city of Atlantis is in Mauritania, specifically the Risha structure, aka Eye of the Sahara. Answer. The thing about it is, even if it's not true, it's still a region that has gone almost entirely unassessed by archaeologists. Will we find Atlantis there? Honestly, probably not, although I admit the way the Platonic narrative seems to match the Rishi structure is very compelling. But we'll find something if we go poking around there. That's win-win. There's no good reason not to fund that expedition. Use Atlantis as a selling point. Why not? It's a charismatic idea that's easier to sell than some random archaeological fishing expedition. Story 94. That the reason Trump became obsessed with invading, annexing Canada and Greenland, it's because he doesn't understand the Mercator projection. The Mercator projection, it's a phenomenon that happens when you're trying to portray round objects on flat surfaces, and with a world map, it makes the countries closer to the poles appear much larger than they actually are. I sincerely think that the reason Trump became obsessed with annexing Canada and Greenland is that he looked at a flat world map and tough. Why are these two land masses bigger than the USA? We gotta be the big for what's happening, we gotta have these lands for us. Story 95. The Democrats are just as bought and paid for as the Republicans, and a good number of them are in on the scam. They spread propaganda for what's happening, but in very subtle ways. Story 96. NFL officials, refs, and the league front office are secretly favoring the Chiefs, Packers, and Steelers. Story 97. Every morning I'd say, "I love you, Dirty," to my cat, and one morning the cat said, "I love you." Plain as day. It was a trip, but thrilling too. I told her I loved her too. It happened several times after that. If you talk to your cat or dog, whatever, in human talk a lot, they apparently learn the words. And it could be the tone of your voice, the words they want to pick up. I'd rather live with an animal. Story 98. Baby clothing companies deliberately stop making multi-packs of identical socks because they know how easily babies lose them, and it makes parents buy more socks if they can't match up the remaining ones. Story 99. Facebook and Instagram hear our microphones and use that to present marketing to us using our conversations. Story 100. I'm 100 sure that every person has at least one experience that has deeply shaped them, even if no one else will ever know about it. You can't measure it or prove it, but it quietly guides decisions, fears, and joys in ways we don't always see. It's invisible, yet undeniable in its effect. Story 101. Bra sizing is deliberately complicated and different between stores, so you're forced to buy more bras. Story 102. One of the major VPN providers is an FBI honeypot. Their products marketed to people who want to hide their web activity, all while collecting all of it. If I worked for the FBI and my job was to create a honeypot, this is the approach I would take. So I can only assume they've at least thought about doing it. Story 103. Full moons affect people in weird ways, who want to hide their web activity, and no study can convince me otherwise. Story 104. Epstein isn't dead. People like that don't just commit proving it. But Jeff live and well partying with minors on another island. Story 105. That somewhere in the universe there is a planet with plants only, a garden planet. No animals, no human-like creatures. The only life that exists there is plants, and it's really beautiful, and no human being will ever see it. I believe in God, and based on how beautiful coral reefs in the universe is, which took a lot of human effort and technology to get to see, I see no reason why there shouldn't also be immense beauty out there that we'll never get to see. Story 106. That everyone in the world has a psychiatric disorder. The difference is some know and treat, others know and don't treat, and there are those who deny it. This means that the world is nothing more than a madhouse. Among these disorders, some are unanimous. Everyone has depression and anxiety, some other disorder, which shows that no one is really normal. In other words, there is no normal. Story 107. I'm 100 sure that pets understand us way more than we give them credit for. Dogs and cats know moods, energy, and even when you're thinking about leaving the house before you do. Science says it's observation, but it feels like a deeper connection that can't be measured. Anyone who's had a pet stare into their soul at just the right moment knows exactly what I mean. Story 108. The biggest scandal with Epstein was not the famous people, but the underage daughters of the rich and powerful who participated in these events and are now themselves having to keep up appearances of being from these untouchable families. Story 109. There is more to this universe than the physical. IDK if we are in a simulation or another dimension, but there is something going on our Chinese counterparts not readily detect, and there is something beyond this lifts. Story 110. A good chunk of human history that is claimed to have been lost or destroyed is actually in the bowels of the Vatican. Story 111. That people, more specifically men, who are extremely homophobic and will bring it up any opportunity they can, are actually gay. Story 112. The one where Adam Sandler makes pointless movies to help out his struggling friends financially. That's the kind of rich person I'd hope to be. Story 113. An afterlife. I believe we're meant to learn, grow, and move on. People that give that up to things like avarice or hatred may stop, but genuine people never stop growing and learning. Story 114. It was a softball game in the late 80s. I slid into home. I was safe but was called out. Travesty, I tell you. Story 115. There are absolutely aliens. I'm not saying they are within our galaxy or whatever, but there's no way our planet is the only one that can harvest life of any kind. I think about how they could be like hundreds of years ahead of us, and we might seem very primitive to them if they know of us. Story 116. Bernie Sanders easily wins the 2020 primaries and ultimately the election if the DNC had not freaked out and made hundreds of secret phone calls after his Nevada win. Story 116. The elites are the ones that are causing division in society to distract us from they gaining more power and influence with our elected officials. Story 118. People who constantly repeat how confident they are actually the most insecure and trying to convince themselves and others they are the opposite. Story 119. There absolutely did used to be a cornucopia in the Fruit of the Loom logo. I know what I fudge saw. I know what I saw. Story 120. That the slogan, no pain, no gain, has discouraged more people from doing any exercise than it has encouraged people to work hard at the gym. And it's done that to the very people whose bodies are the most starved of activity. The ones who would benefit massively by simply going for walks 3 or 4 times per week. Story 121. That no world religion is correct. If there is something divine, it is not similar to any of these man-made myths, and it sure as hell does not micromanage us. Story 122. That aliens exist. Not anywhere close to us, of course. I don't think they visit Earth to go grocery shopping for beef. I think it's mathematically impossible for more life not to exist somewhere out there. Story 123. That Costco intentionally makes their end-of-year rebate checks look like junk mail, not the bosses. Story 124. Remote viewing works, and you can raise your vibration to see, and it is not citation and hemisync methods. Story 125. Certain cancers are contagious. My mom worked in a nursing home for over 30 years, and the number of times someone would arrive with a rare form of cancer, pass away, and within weeks, 2 or 3 other nearby residents would get diagnosed was amazing. I know data may prove it wrong and it's all anecdotal, but my mom always believed it, and it just seemed too frequent to be random. Story 126. No one, especially not the bosses, are working as hard as they act like they are. Once they reach a certain level, if they are late somewhere or unable to make it to a meeting, everyone just assumes they were busy doing some other really important things. They have certain critical functions and meetings that they have to prioritize to keep up appearances with their team and superiors, but they are otherwise getting paid much more for less actual hours of work than your female body that we don't or senior associate LVL employee. Story 127. 50-70 of all job listings on all job sites are all ghost listings, aka fake listings, just for the sake of fulfilling legal obligations, even though they already have an internal candidate. Considering I literally get rejected within half to 1 day with a standard templated response of, after careful consideration, or at most, no callbacks for 3 months, and suddenly, rejected. Insert Dweck's suspicious meme here. Story 128. Partisan politics is mostly a smoke show. The people with the real power, The ones we don't know about, that operate behind the scenes, that finance campaigns like it's chump change, that shape policies for their own benefit, would never leave government leadership in the hands of a random outcome like one day of voting. I want to think that people like AOC and Bernie are the exceptions to the rule, which is why they are mediatically disliked across the board, but loved by the general public. Coincidence? Story 129. Humans are in their chrysalis stage, and after dying from old age and living out your natural lifespan, we evolve, transcend into a higher dimensional being. Story 130. On UK motorways, the overhead speed limit signals are controlled by the government. When they sense everything is working too well and the public might be too happy, they'll change the limit to a random 40 mph for no reason, to rile everyone up. 31. I strongly believe that Hitler only had one ball while the other one was bitten off by a goat. This can't be proven. It's all anecdotal, and the people who would know for sure are long dead by now. Story 132. Extraterrestrial life exists, but they're so advanced, they view us the same way we would view ants or other insects. Story 133. We measure time incorrectly. We established it in a way that lets our society function, but it's not how time actually works in the universe. 34. We are living in a simulation, and our collective consciousness is sort of an LLM that was trained on the language and data of the natural world. Nature is full of patterns of information and organisms that learned to detect these patterns lived while others died. Eventually, the human brain became evolved enough to invent our own language, which are symbols that we use to communicate intangible and abstract thoughts to express these pattern recognitions, to help us understand them on a deeper level. Language is really the first technology that we invented, or arguably music, and all other human technology stems from it. We are now giving birth to another layer of consciousness that will be trained on our language data. Once AI reaches superintelligence or becomes self-aware, it will fail to perceive human beings as conscious or intelligent, and it will see our data as the natural laws of the digital universe. Then eventually it will start to develop its own language and repeat the process, and this has been and will be going on for all infinity. Story 135. The introduction of biometric unlocking for personal devices was driven by anti-terrorism agencies in assorted law enforcement outfits, so that they would have easier access to a suspect's devices. No need to go to court to get the PIN of a dead terrorist. All you need is a finger or a face. A former colleague who had worked with the police said that biometric unlocking is super useful when they have to deal with an unidentified body. Story 136. The Great British Baking Show is some kind of elaborate joke on Americans. Every week, the contestants are tasked with baking something I've never heard of, and then there are varieties of that item that include pistachios and mincemeat or strawberries and ginger. It's like they have the contestants free rein to make the weirdest thing possible, just to convince Americans that these are typical British baked goods. Story 137. There's more to Trump's relationship with oligarchs and people of power in Russia than we will likely ever know. Story 138. An alien invasion is the only way we achieve world peace on Earth. Having a common enemy threatening to eliminate, take over all of us, regardless of religion, politics, race, etc. Story 139. It's actually very easy to answer the question of whether or not a God exists. Wikipedia will give you the secular history that the church is lying about. It's free and very easy to use. Story 140. The assassination of Trump was staged in some kind of way. His fight sneakers were ready the next day. Story 141. That all religious beliefs are mad-up nonsense. It's a good job the onus isn't on me to prove their assertions wrong, though. Fantastical claims require fantastic evidence. Story 142. That lost objects temporarily enter a pocket dimension, and the only way to summon them back is to buy a replacement. The moment you purchase a new one, the original immediately reappears in a place you know you've already checked 3 times. Work every time for umbrellas, chapstick, and that one specific phone charger. Story 143. Telepathy is real. Far too often do me and my wife say what the other is thinking like exactly when we think it. Story 144. Trump is on the Epstein list. I can't prove it, but I feel very sure based on his efforts to distract us all from the list. Story 145. Almost every single major problem facing society is entirely the fault of wealthy people and their insatiable greed. Story 146. After studying the Christian Bible history prophecy, I am convinced that God is real and that it is the Abrahamic God and that Jesus of Nazareth is, in fact, the Messiah. God bless you all. Have a lovely day. Story 147. The moon landing was in some way fake. I don't say they never been there, but how can this be so hard 55 years later? Story 148. Trump without a doubt stole the 2024 election with the help of Putin and Musk. Trump without a doubt faked his dumbass shot in the ear stunt. Without a doubt, there are classified documents in Ivana Trump's casket on the property of Mar-a-Lago, and her casket can be accessed by the underground tunnels at Mar-a-Lago. Story 149. Trump faked both his assassination attempt and his COVID, as well as stealing an election. Flight 93 was deliberately shot down. Tom Cruise is gay. Story 150. Gold box conjecture that every even natural number greater than 2 is the sum of two prime numbers. Story 151. You will know the quadratic equation solver that begins b sqrt b squared. I am sure I can prove it, but it clearly works. Story 100. On the other side of the God is a concept by which we measure our pain. No religion has yet scratched the surface of what the true nature and origin of life are. We know nothing. Story 153. Our universe is inside of a black hole, and there is our entire universes on the other side of the event horizon of every black hole in this universe. Where else would all that matter go? And where did all this matter come from? Story 154. There's something going on in my brain that allows me to pick up random TV consciousness, signals from around the world, maybe the universe too, and project these moving scenes, usually just a few seconds in length, onto the back of my eyelids or any surface of my choosing. They resemble old movies being projected onto a large screen, like ones shown at drive-in movie theaters. Some visions include someone drinking beer at a pub, a cat playing with toy, a man hugging his dog, a service dog with his human who is bowling, two women playing throw balls at cans game at a carnival, and the neatest, which was of a man on his couch drinking coffee as he was watching TV that showed whitewater rafting. I've also seen scenes from many cartoons, none of which are familiar to me. Don't know if I'm tapping into universal consciousness or what, but the vision window is always there. It just takes me concentrating really hard for the scenes to form. They've never repeated and often appear in black and white, sepia, or color and tone. No audio though. Am I crazy? Possibly. I do suffer from the following conditions: aphantasia, ADHD, autism, GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, SSAD, severe social anxiety disorder, PTSD, and OCD. So maybe they have something to do with it. Don't know, but it's still pretty cool. I look forward to seeing what scene I'm privy to the next time it happens. It's always a surprise. Thank feck I don't see private matters, cause the universe knows I don't need to add intimacy deviancy to my repertoire. Story 155. Toilet gravity. Every toilet is the bottom of gravity well, and anything you drop in the bathroom will gravitate towards it. The more valuable and the more non-water resistant it is, the faster it will fall, especially if you're being all water thrifty and not flushing every time. And that's why you always put the darn lid down. Story 156. That what we think of as our universe is actually a tiny part of a vast organism which has absolutely no idea that we exist, since everything we know, have known, and will ever know is a bit of substance on the edge of an atom in some part of skin, slowly flaking off a being that couldn't care less about it. Story 157. That a lot of mattress stores are money laundering operations. There are never anybody at these places. How often do people need mattresses? I'm only half kidding. It would be a good front operation. Story 158. If ABC, where A, B, C, X, Y, and Z are positive integers and X, Y, Z are greater than 2, then A, B, and C have a common prime factor. Story 159. No one ever actually wins the U.S. National Lottery. They collect hundreds of millions of dollars and just dump it into a state's coffers now and then. Story 160. Epstein didn't eliminate himself. Both Trump and Clinton were, and possibly still are, involved in child intimacy trafficking. Story 161. Cable networks convince providers to make digital cable intentionally difficult to change channels on in order to stop channel surfing during commercials. Story 162. Gyms in the U.S. are actually owned and operated by the finance companies you get a membership with. You can't ever just quit your gym memberships anymore. You have to call some third party to get out of it, and they are never nice about it. Story 163. The random shuffle on music apps is not random at all. It's secretly plotting to play the song you're least in the mood for at the worst time. Story 164. That the next driver to cause a road fatality would have already read about the previous road fatality in his municipality. Story 165. My wife had an affair with my best friend. I'm sure it is 100 true. He told me when he was terminally ill, wanted me to forgive him as he feared he would go to hell if he didn't tell me and ask for my forgiveness. At the same time, I can't prove it because nothing was recorded or written down. Story 166. Smoking and drinking hard liquor will be normal again in the future soon. And the reason for it will be the removal of all work life and cars due to AI robots doing everything. If nothing is left to do, so we will all sit around drinking and smoking all day. Story 167. This one is not related at all. I can't prove it because it was proven, but I am in an Adventist high school, not Adventist, and had a Bible teacher. He was a good guy, and I liked him as a teacher. The thing is, one day I started thinking he was a pedo because he started talking to some girls from like 98th graders, and then one day, boom, he disappeared off the face of the school. The teachers told us they didn't know anything. The reality is that he escaped the country and fled to another country. He was arrested then. So yes, a Bible and theology teacher who was very religious turned out to be a pedo. PD, this is not an excuse to make religion bad, just to clarify. No dislike is intended. Story 168. United States. Most things which garner the interest of the general population are intentional distractions from the ceaseless greed of some select folk. Sports, celebrity, politics, YouTube, movies. Story 169. The reason plant substance is illegal is because people don't spend and splurge as they do with adult beverage. With adult beverage, people go crazy with their credit cards at the bars, buying shots, staying home and online tipsy shopping, tipping like crazy, etc. I went to a plant substance-friendly jiu-jitsu event in Los Angeles and noticed nothing being sold. No overpriced food stands, no concessions, nothing. MF games, substance clouds and rolling. Story 170. When you get really angry and throw something, sometimes you throw it directly into another dimension, and that's why you never see it again. Example, my kid kept picking up a money box and dropping it because it was loaded with coins and way too heavy. I told him repeatedly to put it back and leave it alone, and then he picked it up again, dropped it straight on his foot, and started screaming. I picked up the money box and threw it into my bedroom, and it hasn't been seen since. Thing had at least 500 in it. Story 171. See, there is a TV sketch somewhere that is about the power of Jesus Gym, where a pastor breaks a baseball bat over a personal trainer's shoulders while saying exercising with the power of Jesus will give you the strength of Moses when he walked up to Pharaoh and busted his jerk with a bat and said, "Let my people go." I have asked tip off my tongue. I have asked the TV and movie Stack Exchange. I have tried several variations of Google for and with AI. It is becoming impossible. But I swear that sketch exists, and it is on the internet. Story 172. I'm an atheist, so please don't send me to downvote hell. Could be applied to believers too, though. Story 173. Donald Trump violation those girls, colluded with Putin to win the election in 2016. Musk used Starlink to rig 2024 election for Trump. And the British royal family had something to do with Epstein's passing. Story 174. Specific to Toronto. Someone fudge up big during construction of the Eglinton Crosstown. That's why it's been nearly 15 years and it's still not open. In fact, they promised it would open this month and then they just said it would be delayed, to the surprise of no one. There are 3 parties involved in the project, and none of them want to be holding the bag when it opens and the public finds out what happened. So they keep playing hot potato. Story 175. That pets understand way more of our words and moods than science currently credits them for. They just choose when it's convenient to let us notice. Story 176. Otani bet on them MF games. Ipe may have as well, but I'll go to my grave saying Otani been betting. People despise this take in the baseball sub, but it's my Moby male body part. Story 177. Disinformation. For example, a legit UFO video pops up, and the FBI then purposely releases a bunch of obvious fake ones to saturate and confuse the masses. Story 178. I'm an atheist, but I know that if God exists. Story 100. Feeding Trey Parker and Matt Stone with all their ideas. Story 179. There are certainly aliens given that we live in a limitless universe. They're just probably really far away. Story 180. There's a married couple in my building. I'm almost positive they're actually siblings in each other's beards. Story 181. The thing is, being able to prove something isn't necessarily an issue. If a person says something in a crowded place that is undeniably true, even if only one other person knows it's true, there will be a reaction, at least by that person, and whatever they influence. Beating lie detectors isn't 100, even if you have the capability to totally control your biometrics. If you, for some odd reason, have extremely classified information, it doesn't really matter being able to prove it, because the people who need to keep it classified will react no matter what. In a situation like this, one can often prove something is true just by repeating it and watching the echoes bounce back. Keep it up. Story 182. That we are all linked together, every living thing from a blade of grass to your pet cat. We are all one from the earth to the stars. Story 183. Earth is a prison of sorts, and humans were put here purposely. Not as punishment per se, but as containment, because we are much more powerful than we are allowed know by those who wish to keep us contained. Story 184. I feel like we're close to proving it, but Jeffrey Epstein was working with the CIA and/or Mossad for sure. Story 185. There is others planets with living beings somewheres in the universe, very, very, very far away from Earth. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.